Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our Stantec Water webinar series today. Today we're going to talk about using people as sensors and how customer insight can improve your operation and asset performance. My name is Ryan Redallen. I'm the marketing director for Stantec's Water Group. I'll be your moderator. I'm going to start off with a few housekeeping items. First, you'll be muted during the presentation. You can ask questions or put in comments at any time using the GoToWebinar questions function. I will read those with 10, 15, 20 minutes left, depending on how the presentation goes. If there's time, based on the amount of questions that come in, I will also unmute you with about 5 minutes left and let you ask your question live or comment live or follow up if you would like to. I will also follow up with a PDH certificate that you can submit to your local agency for potential credit for PDHs. And again, that's up to obviously your certifying agency, but I will follow up with a certificate usually within a week or so after the event. And just a plug, we do hold these typically twice a month, and we post all the recordings up on stantec.com, so you can find them there. And I encourage you to view those past recordings or to share them with your colleagues if so inclined. With that, I will turn it over to Jonathan Fitzpatrick, who's our digital practice lead for water, and he will take you through the presentation.
That's great. Thanks, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time zone you're in, part of the world. I'm really excited to share our People as Sensors webinar. I think we've got an exciting opportunity here to show how social media data can be used to improve utility performance and asset performance. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a brief presentation, and I'll do a demo of customer insight and the social media analysis that is possible using the tool, and talk about some additional use cases that we've have with some of our clients, and then we'll do questions at the end as Ryan mentioned. So my name is Jonathan Fitzpatrick. I'm the digital practice lead for water in North America, and I've been working in the water sector for about 15 years, but focused largely on automation and operational technology. I've had the privilege to work on some of the largest water and wastewater projects in North America, from early in my career, the Seymour Capline and Filtration Plant in North Vancouver, to the permanent canals, closures and pumps down in New Orleans, really spanning the continent and even some overseas projects as well. Largely, I've focused on getting the most out of operation technology systems. How do we push the boundary on what's possible and what they can do, and what data we can bring in order to improve operations and asset performance? And I'm excited to share with you today a novel approach to doing just that, to monitoring service levels and issues that are going on with assets. Before we get too far in, I just wanted to have a quick safety moment. Cybersecurity is at the heart of every OT system that we design, every operation technology system that we design, and every application that we develop. And it's important to keep, I think, cybersecurity in mind, especially right now with all of us working at home and at the office, where we don't necessarily have that perimeter that's being maintained by companies or our utilities. So a few items that Interpol has said are important, things like backing up online and offline files regularly, both personally and in your enterprise, in order to protect against ransomware attacks and such. Strengthening your home network. When I transitioned to the home office, I spent a fair bit of time deploying my own enterprise-grade networking system, and knowing my wife with multiple Wi-Fi networks and such. Using strong passwords and keeping software up to date, especially with a lot of IoT devices on your network that aren't patched regularly. It's important to keep your computers and laptops up to date to protect against incursions from these things that don't often get updated. Social media profiles is an important one. That's one we're going to be talking about today. It's important to keep that up to date as well, and protect it from attack. So customer insight and social media analysis is a part of the Stantec Insight Analytics suite of tools. It's a flexible toolkit of advanced analytics and applications that leverages Stantec subject matter experts to enable transformational asset monitoring and operation. SA is a holistic approach to advanced system monitoring and control with applications across the water spectrum. from horizontal to vertical assets, conveyance management analytics, asset optimization analytics, say in a plant environment, also to business processes, such as financial analysis and rate studies and affordability with our FAMS application, which you can also find on stantec.com, and customer sentiment analytics, which we'll be talking about today. All of these are focused on turning with that water and operations mindset. So what is customer insight? Well, and we call it CI for short. It's a web application that consumes some novel data sources, such as social media data, customer call log data, say from a call log system or another call log system that utility might be using, online news and surveys, such as SurveyMonkey. And it uses this information along with natural language processing algorithms to provide context to the sometimes and perhaps always chaotic social media feed. By doing so, by running this analysis and consuming these data feeds, we can identify issues with assets in the field, and we'll see some of that in the demo. We can measure the sentiment of the community towards the utility. We can classify a lot of the impressions and topics and feed into relevant service areas and that are applicable and provide context to that water utility. Context is key, and when we have that chaotic social media data feed, we need a tool like customer insight and that analysis, and again, that subject matter expertise of how this applies to water utility in order to distill it down into something that provide context to operations and management and other users. Stantec has been engaged in social media analysis for a few years now and using it as a part of our augmented research practice based in the UK working with water companies in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand to understand the pulse of the community and how that might impact their capital improvement programs or operations. Social media analysis by extension does provide many benefits to the utility, and it also does it at many levels within an organization, from management to asset operations and maintenance to the engineering side or the project delivery side. One of the hardest, I think, things to measure really is that social license to operate. It's very ethereal. There's not really good data sources to do so, and there's a silent majority of people that are not engaging. Well, one of the things that we can use social media analysis for is to help measure those service levels and to help measure that social license to operate, to quantify it in a way that to both comply with regulations and also to make sure that the utility has a good relationship with its customer base. Monitoring service levels using sentiment and intent classification. From these new data sources, we can measure and evaluate the issues that are important to the population. We can measure the effect of programs, and we can address these problems proactively. Responsiveness, or when we're conveying messages back to somebody who has contacted the utility, is very transparent and it's visible to all those that are listening on these channels. When someone responds or makes a note on Twitter or a complaint on Twitter, you can clearly see the response back, and some of that will also be shown in the demo, where we can start to see that negativity is impeded because we have that response. And sentiment can also be measured in relation to things like press releases or articles, or as a part of direct feedback. Looking uniquely at and this direct feedback loop is uniquely enabled by customer insight. On the operations side, we find, and I was surprised when we were first turning on this application, that people are sharing operationally significant information, things like water leaks, bursts, sewer backups, odor problems. During the demo, we'll see some examples of this, of these asset issues that are being detected using social media analysis and are being told to the utility by individuals. And these are often problems that will not be detected by conventional SCADA or telemetry systems. Monitoring sentiment engagement on project and program specific basis is also possible using social media activity. We can use it as a part of public engagement and consultation processes. Every major infrastructure project has extensive public consultations using largely conventional communication methods. Online communications and social media can reach a wide and often silent audience to yield a happier local community that feels engaged in the project. They feel that their voice is being heard. So where did customer insight come from? Well, it was born out of pioneering work that has been undertaken in the UK to help our clients measure and comply with what they call the service incentive mechanism. What we do is we use social media to provide context and relate issues important to the community and proactively address them in order to increase the sentiment of the community to the utility. The service incentive mechanism has two pieces. It's customer satisfaction surveys, that qualitative piece, and then the quantitative piece, so those unwanted contacts. So how often are people having issues with the utility or with their service? And there's big penalties and incentives associated with the SIM. And so they need a tool in order to help them address this regulatory problem that they've been faced with. That's where customer insight comes in. It's not only UK water companies that are concerned with customer sentiment. North American utilities are facing large capital improvement programs, leading to affordability concerns and ultimately issues with stakeholder buy-in. Using and monitoring these novel data sources can assist with tracking public perceptions of the utility and analysis of service level acceptance. In addition, people are providing them actionable data. In effect, customer insight turns people into sensors. It's not just about brand management, about sentiment, but it's also getting operational benefit from the tool. Really, there's no better time than the present to deploy some type of sentiment analysis and to use customer insight. There are significant social media users worldwide. 71% of internet users have active social media accounts, 2.5 billion people. It's been 2 decades since the original launch of the social media platforms, things like 6 Degrees and Friendster, ones that no one thinks about anymore, or I don't even think they're even active anymore. Long before Facebook, but now with 2.5 billion users, much of it concentrated in urban centers, it is safe to say that social media is here to stay, and communications via social media are only going to accelerate. We're seeing this trend continue with the rise of active social media users. You look at 500 million social media users have been added in the last 4 years. It's only going to accelerate with internet adoption and use of these tools. People, especially young people, are using social media as their primary communication method. In fact, when looking at the social media data feed from the London area, and this is what we'll go through in the demo, is data from London, we've seen that Twitter users specifically are reporting water leaks and outages. And in fact, we've seen Twitter users making the report on Twitter and asking the Twitter community how they report it to Thames Water, not realizing that they can just call directly to alert Thames to the issue. These types of events will become all the more common as younger generations continue to take a larger share of the population and social media continues to push out conventional methods of communication. Customer insight allows us to passively harness the social media data and leverage it for use cases across a utility. We're able to constantly listen to the social media data feed to detect actionable events, measure service levels, and the social license to operate, ultimately leading to a better asset performance and less negative interactions between the utility and its customers. The key aspect there is that passively harness social media data. There's been attempts in the past to use or to produce applications that people are supposed to be communicating with directly or using in order to get information to utility. And ultimately, those have very low penetration. People are not adopting them because they're already used to sending this data via social media. And we can listen. We can develop algorithms that can search and find those tools. We can classify it, and we can report it by exception to the correct people. There's many possible use cases for a city, municipality, or region, from social media monitoring, customer engagement and buy-in for utility operations. I think is critical period, especially during this period of infrastructure renewal, with significant capital improvement programs and potential rate increases and affordability concerns that are going to create friction with a population. Using social media analysis, we can help to craft some of the messaging and help secure that stakeholder acceptance, and perhaps even align some of these projects with the issues that the citizens are experiencing to garner, again, that social acceptance, that stakeholder engagement. The program level, community engagement and sentiment monitoring are also very valuable. Many large projects require specific and significant community engagement during the design development to obtain that stakeholder buy-in. This is not the program now, we're talking about the project. Social media data can be used as a new data source to hear the silent majority that are commenting online, but not a part of the engagement process. Reactions to press releases and news articles can be tracked and analyzed. The engagement can be measured during the project sentiment, and social media can be monitored to proactively detect any issues affecting a community and address them in a timely manner, stopping the sentiment from going more negative. Also, during a project where it has the potential to impact a population, this could be due to road construction, which is all too common, of course, in large linear infrastructure, or even in vertical infrastructure where roads are shut down, and we're seeing that this is creating friction with the community. We can detect that, and we can address it in a timely manner. We can also use it as we're seeing those issues. We can use that to tailor the program. Well, how do we reduce that friction in the future? When did that friction arise? What were the types of activities that were causing it? How do we use that as a feedback mechanism into future design development and future planning, so that we're avoiding those issues with the population in the future? And lastly, event detection, the title of today's webinar, People as Sensors, using social media data for monitoring and analysis is a powerful tool to detect issues that are affecting an asset base. In fact, many of these problems are difficult to detect using conventional SCADA systems. We just don't have the instrumentation or the resolution of instrumentation really to detect them. But the citizens in the community are more than happy to bring them to your attention on social media. Critical events can and do go undetected, such as sewage leaks in protected habitats. But these can be seen by hikers, and they can be reported using social media to lessen the effect and impact to that environment. I'm going to go into the demo here. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Customer Insight saw its start in the UK with that service incentive mechanism. So I think it's fitting that I'll take you all through our demo of data collected in London and the surrounding region. I think everyone is familiar with it, with London, of course, but it's a very technically sophisticated population with significant social media acceptance, similar to many North American cities and urban areas. And we've taken in a lot of test data throughout the world, and there are certainly a lot of comparisons between what we see in this demo here and what we're seeing in our major metropolitan areas in North America. The citizens of London provide excellent feedback to their local utility, in this case Thames Water, on social media, and Thames Water in a lot of cases is actually responding back. And I think that helps with that feedback loop. So we'll go to the application here. So Customer Insight is a web application, as I mentioned at the beginning, and it can be deployed very quickly in a matter of weeks, and it can yield actionable insight shortly thereafter. A lot of the models and machine learning algorithms that have been developed are applicable across the water utility, things like the topic classifiers and other models that are in the background to power the application. We've got numerous different numerous different views of the data. We have a summary view that would be applicable to someone like a utility manager or public relations officer. Have a quick overview of the current sentiment and what's going on in the utility. Issues tracker and a map view, something that is applicable to operations and operation-centric, trying to tie the issues that are going on to the geographic regions and the assets. Some other important ones like issue tracking, being able to set up those issues so that they're tracked and automatically detected and presented. And this could be used for any real type of issue. It could be a water leak to a customer service problem, as we'll see. An important feature of customer insight and really any application Stantec is developing is its flexibility, such that it can be deployed for a lot of different goals to solve a lot of different problems, whether on a project basis or for long-term monitoring. And it can be deployed with very flexibly, lots of different technology platforms. It can be tied into other tools as well, and which we've done with even some of our own applications around our social media analysis for autonomous vehicles, and also with one of the other use cases we'll talk about where we're tying it into some executive dashboards for Tennessee Valley. So this data and this feed can be linked with a lot of other aspects, a lot of other tools that can support a water utility. For today's demo, we're going to show analysis of Twitter data that we've collected from London. As we mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of other data sources that can come in, like news data, call log data, etc. But for now, we're going to focus on Twitter because I think it shows a good example of detecting those issues. So I bring up the summary page, and as that utility manager or public relations officer, I can quickly see what my current sentiment is that's been calculated. Again, tying back to that service incentive mechanism and what's really important to be measured from a regulatory perspective and from a community engagement perspective. I can see how that's trending over time. In this case, I'm showing information for the last 30 days. You can see how that's moving based on contacts and in this case, in tweets that are coming in. You can see what the main topics are that are coming up. Customer service tends to be a big issue, but we can see that there's lots of water outage and water burst leaks and service problems, water quality issues that people are also complaining about on social media. So I can proactively manage those issues. I can drill down into specific categories and see, when do I have problems? Is there a pattern? Is there a trend to my water outages? And I can look back over longer periods of time and see if there might be a pattern to when this is occurring or when I'm getting issues. What does the contact timeline look like? What is the reason why people are asking about water outages and issues? So all of this is filterable based on the parameters that we have shown here: topic, sentiment, and intent. This provides this convenient overview of recent activity. If I go into my issues page, so quickly here. Now the issues page is really interesting, and I think that it provides great context to the social media data feed. Again, we're refining down that chaotic social media data stream into actionable items that are being detected by customer insight and displayed for action. You can see here that these are the issues based on issue categories that we've built that have come up. For instance, this one here, leakage number 25, that has come up. We can see that this Twitter user here is talking about a leakage outside his road, or 75 Worsley Road. This is an issue that customer insight has identified, that we can have suggested next steps, who to contact if you've got a problem. I can share this information by clicking on this. It'll bring up an email that I can send to somebody saying what the problem is, where it occurred, and what the next steps are. And this can be done for lots of different categories. Customer insight or customer service problems might want to go to somebody else. So they might have a customer service department or a customer service manager who wants to look at those ones versus more operationally significant ones like water outages or leaks. Another example where this Twitter user is talking about low pressure and giving the location again, and that they've been having issues with pressure for the morning. This is something that the tool has detected and can action very easily. If I want to go and I make my own issues, because all of these are customizable. If I want to make a new issue, I just go into my issues settings page, and I can add in a new issue. I'll just bring up an existing one, say leakage as an example. Talk about what are the typical topics associated with that, what's the name of it, what are the procedures that I must follow to fix it, and who to contact about that issue. Very shortly, this will also be you'll be able to send alerts by exception only. So instead of someone having to go in and share it directly as an email, the tool will just automatically send out that email if you select it to do so. If you select it to send out an automated email associated with certain issue types, things like leakage or water outage that might be very important, or burst pipes as an example. We can set up issues to track a lot of different things that, again, align with the different user groups, public relations, utility managers, engineering. We can set up all of those issues types, and they can be tracked on the issues dashboard. Moving further down, we look at our map view. And again, one of the big focuses is not just about social media analysis as a brand management tool, but how do we relate this to assets? Because that's ultimately what water utilities are managing. They're managing assets. So how do we look and show this information adjacent to on a map? And that's what we're trying to do here is locate that information so it's adjacent to the assets that are being impacted or could be related to that issue. And I can quickly go and filter down if I want to go and look at water outage again here. And I can zoom in and I can click on this particular one, and I can see that there's been vibrating sounds from water pipes. This could even be used as a part of a predictive algorithm to say that maybe this is associated with a future burst that this person has been bringing in. This could be an issue that is now proactively going to avoid a future problem. And in this case, we've got another Twitter user who looks like they're running through the park, and they detected stinking water running down the hill in Gladstone. So this is, again, something that this information is coming in. They're sending it by Twitter. They're not calling Thames Water. They're sending it by Twitter, and it can be now actioned by using customer insight and send that email out to the operations team. Future versions of the tool, and this is version 1. This is and during future versions, we do have a strong roadmap of additional analytics and integrations with other data sources, such as SCADA data. I'd like to be able to tie in to that analysis and use the telemetry data that's coming in from these systems. We can overlay these issues, and we can now start to predict what assets are associated with these problems. Again, we're providing that additional context to the operators, so that when this problem comes up, we're tying into the telemetry data, and we can present that together as one contextual issue, combining both sets of data. Customer insight can also be used to provide data with other applications. As I talked about, as a part of our Gen AV autonomous vehicles project, we're using customer insight as a data source to use social media data for brand management of autonomous vehicle companies. We can tie it in with in future iterations, easily integrated into our financial analysis package, where you would have a social lens overlaid with affordability and rate studies as a part of that financial analysis piece that we can do. Customer insight can also be included in really any holistic water analytics project with our other SIA tools, being able to take in these operationally significant events and tie them back to that SCADA data. Lots of different ways that we can view this. And if we want to explore the data set, we can go through and we can look at, in water outages, look at all of the complaints that are coming in. We can see who's active, who's having a lot of complaints, and we can filter specifically for what they're talking about, and we can see what that contact timeline looks like, right? In a lot of cases here, they're talking directly to Thames Water. You can see Thames Water a lot in the data feed. And a lot of that is because Thames Water does respond. And so as a result, they are getting good feedback from their utility. Or sorry, from their community. We can upload other data sets. Really any data that in a specific format can be uploaded and can be processed and shown alongside the Twitter data, news data, survey data that is already in the application. We can look and we can see what past reports are coming in, as a part of our reporting feature. It just provides a significant, a deep analysis of that social media data and the ability to view it in a lot of ways that are significant to different groups within a utility. And there are other use cases. So we're using customer insight with the Tennessee Valley Authority as a part of their new social media campaign, brand management and program engagement. We're interfacing through the Customer Insight API directly into an executive dashboard that we're also managing for TVA, consuming a lot of this, a lot of different social media data and providing those views and analysis that are very important to some of the bigger projects that TVA has ongoing. TVA has a very broad portfolio, as you'd imagine, one of the largest regional operators in North America. So using social media data across that wide portfolio is a way of digesting that information and providing that context. And use case number 2 here, a very recent one around transportation disruptions. And this was something that we originally hadn't targeted customer insight for the detection of transportation disruptions, but the federal government of Canada made a call for innovations in response to COVID-19. And so we submitted our customer insight application under the non-medical category related to surveillance, tracking, situation awareness, and critical response. It was selected in the fall of 2020 and it has now been moved over into the Innovative Solutions Canada for testing. It's available up on their website for federal agencies and other municipal regions within Canada to test out customer insight to see if it can apply to their problems. It was ultimately has now been selected by Transport Canada, and we've been working with Transport Canada for the last few years. Sorry, not last few years, a few weeks in order to build out the use case to see if we can use transportation or social media data in order to detect major disruptions within supply chains and transportation issues that are coming and affecting Canada. Now, a lot of this is pandemic related. There's been a lot of transportation issues and supply chain problems, of course, because of COVID-19. But this tool can be applied generally and to a lot of different, both very local transportation disruptions and also in the case of what Transport Canada is looking at a very global level. So the use cases really are quite broad. When we look at the what is available with social media analysis, there's a lot of different use cases that we can get into here. Excuse me. Okay, Brian, I think do we have any questions that are coming in?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for the demo and the presentation there. We do have some questions. First, I think is a good one to start off with, and that's how important is it for a utility to have a strong social media communication strategy for customer insight to be able to yield the kind of results that you're showing?
It's a good question, and what we've seen, and like I said, like Thames Water is a good example where they do have that strong social media presence, and they are responding back, and we've seen that a lot of citizens are now using that as a communication method. But we've looked at a lot of other centers. We pointed it at cities like San Diego, looking at the city of Vancouver, and we've seen that people are already using this tool. One was we were thinking about, well, how could this affect parking in the city of Kelowna, as an example? And it turns out that people are already using Twitter. It's just that nobody's listening. It helps to have that social media campaign and that social media policy, and not necessarily to detect it, because we can do that passively. We can bring in that information, and we can display it, and we can action those issues. But ultimately what you want to do is be able to stave off or stop the negativity from occurring. And we do that by responding back. And so what you'll often see, and actually I do have a slide on this, is a typical issue. Someone will come in and there'll be a negative tweet, right? Road in front of my house is flooded. And if there's nobody there to respond, it'll just go continually negative. But if you do respond, if you get back to them, you provide that response that a field technician is on the way, you can head off that negativity. And ultimately, you can improve that sentiment and improve that contact, bringing up, in this case, the perception of the utility. So I guess to summarize, I think that it's not necessary to have that robust social media policy in order to take advantage of social media analysis, but it does help in order to improve that sentiment.
All right, good. You've shown London and talked about TVA and some other big cities, but a question came in about what's the smallest system we've usually used the application for, or I guess in other words, how well is this going to work for a smaller utility versus a bigger utility?
It's a good question, and it does tend to I would say that it does scale well. We have looked at, like I was talking about, parking in Kelowna was one example where we looked at data feeds that were coming in on parking structures as an example. And there were people that were tweeting pictures of issues or complaints that they would have associated with parking, and it's just that nobody was responding. And I think Kelowna is about 150 or 200,000 people. Obviously, bigger population, you're going to get more contact, you're going to get more communication. But it does tend to scale down, where even smaller urban areas, there are people that are using social media. It's just not as prevalent. You can still detect those issues, though. You only need a couple people to detect a leak in an environmentally sensitive area to have it really be worthwhile to run that analysis. One of the nice things about the work that we do and how the analysis is done is it scales well with the number of users, right? So don't have a lot of tweets. Well, it doesn't take a lot of data or a lot of bandwidth in order to use it, versus say a larger city like London. One of the things that we also often do as a part of an engagement, or when we're looking at using customer insight, is actually looking at the historical record and just seeing, is there people in the region that are using social media data in order to communicate on these issues. So we can do that early on, and just to suss out whether or not it would really be applicable.
Okay, good. Okay, another question came in here. Let's see here. Comment, let's see. Can we assume you could sample more abstract topics like the public's interest and/or support for infrastructure spending? If so, what projects, for example, are of the highest interest, and even the sense of urgency they have around such projects as it relates to the future, say climate change? So basically, can this be used to help build that support for public interest and spending and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I do think that it can be used for that. And we're working with an organization in the U.S. that is looking at public sentiment engagement on topics like climate change and water reuse, and they have a whole portfolio of things that they're looking at in order to detect and see what is that engagement, what is that applicability. And we're using customer sentiment with a slightly different topic classifier and different model in order to build that out and to detect some of those, I would say, more abstract concepts versus more conventional, like water leaks and that sort of thing. So you can use it for very large topics and programs. In some of the data that we've seen from some users, people are talking about these issues, energy mix, climate change, and those impacts and those effects. We can detect that, and we can categorize it appropriately.
All right, good. Let's see, next question here. How do you attach a tweet to a location if they don't provide that information?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So there,
big brother there.
yeah, big brother, yeah. There's a number of ways that we can do it. So if someone has their cell phone, and I'm sure after I say this, everybody that's on there is going to go and check and make sure that they don't have this on. But if you have a location set up, if you're a Twitter user and if you have location sharing set up, then that tweet gets tagged with GPS accurate location of where that tweet was made from. If you don't have that set up, then Twitter does still collect some location data, but it's more general. It's more about a neighborhood or an area. And so we kind of do a best effort to try to determine where within that area that tweet was done. But oftentimes when people are presenting or reporting an issue, they are saying where they are. So even if they don't have location set up on their phone, or the area that Twitter is reporting is too big, we can still use a geolocation analytic in order to go through that tweet and detect that location and plot that on the map. So and that's using Twitter or social media. For call log data, you tend to have better resolution because that call is associated with a person who's associated with an account and a location. So that in that case, that location is fairly easy to determine and detect. So there's a number of different tools that we use in order to determine location and try to tie it back to somewhere on the map or an asset. But it's not going to be every contact or every tweet that comes in.
All right, great. Does your algorithm account for isolated incidents? And if so, how do you respond? An example, my water's off again, but really it's due to the utility had turned their water off due to an unpaid bill. Like, is it able to eliminate those from the analysis or deal with those specifically?
That's a good point. We don't currently have something like that in there. There is the ability to block certain searches and certain terms, and even malicious users and such can also be blocked. Generally, that would likely come in as a problem. We would detect that as an issue if someone was complaining about it, and then it would, in this case, you could easily just mark it as complete or not applicable.
All right, maybe a future enhancement, huh?
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, this is version 1 of the application. We have a few key installations and clients that we're working with, but we're always interested in new applications. And the plan is, along with this, the roadmap for customer insight, is to take that feedback in and build out those new features and make it really applicable. Like I was mentioning, the flexibility is really important, and so there's a lot of different views or analysis that we can show that might be applicable to one user or the other, and we're more than happy to include that in a particular installation.
All right, the inevitable question about cost model or pricing. I'll just summarize. Basically, can you discuss how it's deployed and charged, et cetera?
Right. Well, the current deployments that we've done have been done on a subscription model. Tends to be a deployment engagement up front in order to determine what issues are of interest to help build out that topic classifier and some of the other ML that's in the background. And then that just gets deployed, and there's and it can be done by subscription. Tends to scale with the number of tweets or news articles that are coming in, and we do a bit of an analysis up front to say that here's what the expectation is, and then that goes into that cost model. So smaller communities tend to have less tweets, less social media coming in, tends to cost less. Larger communities, more data that's being processed, more analysis, and therefore tends to be more expensive. This can also be, that's what we've done right now. That's what the current deployments are, how they're set up. But we're open to flexible contracting options. I mean, using customer insight on a project basis, if this could be something that Stantec uses to project or program management, and that contract might look a bit different. And so I think that we're interested in working with and finding out how this works well with our clients.
All right, that's a good question here. A couple that are fairly similar, but basically, who's the typical user of the tool? Is it the communities or the client's PR group, customer service group, the operations group? Is this really a partnership between those groups? Like, who's typically in the dashboard and using it?
I'd say right now it's largely, well, it's kind of split, right, between public relations and more like utility management, and looking at holistically, what are the issues, and what's my dashboard telling me? What do the citizens care about? How does that map back to service levels and service incentives? So I think that's a key part of it. But you look at, say, the Transport Canada case. This is being deployed specifically for people who are trying to detect specific issues and hopefully predict and stave them off. So I would say that it's split right now, between that management group and between the operations side. We're building it for both camps. I mean, we recognize that utilities are operating assets, and you can do brand analysis, and there are brand management companies out there, but it's hard to take that brand management or that pure sentiment and track it back to an asset. And it's hard to do that operational connection. I think that's where Stantec brings in that subject matter expertise, and that's what this tool brings in. Is it really boils it down to what is important to a utility.
Good. All right, another question here. I believe our PR team is already doing some kind of sentiment analysis, or at least social media watching. Have you had experience building off existing sentiment tools to build in some of these additional features of customer insight?
Yes, we have, actually. So we've in the TVA case, where actually there's some existing social media analysis that's being done, and we're taking a feed from that social media system in order to do some of the provide some additional analysis that isn't available in that for that company, and some of the operational elements to it. So we're more than happy to work with existing technology systems. We recognize that there a lot of companies are already doing this as a part of their public relations, and it's just, well, how do you add that utility context, that operational context?
All right. You mentioned previously looking at maybe adding in SCADA data to figure out the exact asset that maybe someone's talking about. Do you anticipate using maybe machine learning to start getting into more predictive analysis of leaks or other things?
It's a great question, and the answer is very much yes. I mean, we see this customer insight as a big piece of many of our applications that use machine learning and predictive analysis, and being able to take the data feed that we have in here, using it to detect, but also using machine learning in order to, and a good example is actually one of those issues that I pulled up, where it talked about vibrations and within a piping system. It's like, well, that might be indicative of something else, and perhaps we've seen that before. And a machine learning algorithm may be able to track that back to a potential failure of a system in that kind of predictive way. When I look at my issues dashboard here, one of the tracks, actually, unfortunately I don't have any that are showing up, is actually prediction. And there hasn't been any that have come in recently. But where we predict an issue, it does show up as a predicted card in the issue tracker log. A lot of the work that we're doing with Transport Canada is actually to determine whether or not we can use that social media data not just to detect disruptions, but to predict them. So that'll be rolled out here fairly shortly.
Great. Another question here. This is a good one. Any plans to account for planned utility work for automated response using geo-tagging?
Well, I think there might be now. That's a great.
That's what I was thinking.
That's a great idea. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good suggestion. No, we're always looking for great ideas and how to tie this all together and bring in that. Like, this is version 1 of the application. I mean, we want to see, where we can take it, how we can tie this into into those types of systems, and and we'd be more than happy to explore that use case.
All right. Does it incorporate other social media platform inputs as well as Twitter? So Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc.
Yeah, so it's a good question. And so right now it does principally use Twitter as a social media input. We are building in APIs and integrations with Facebook and others. A lot of that got put on hold, and I believe is actually we're just investigating how to add it back in. But due to the presidential election in the U.S. At the end of last year, a lot of those social media companies had to lock down their APIs. And so at the same time, that's when we were trying to integrate them. So we're still exploring it, and very shortly we'll have those integrations as well. What we found though, which is interesting, and there's a lot of from a brand management or public relations perspective. Yes, bringing in Facebook and Instagram are important, and that's why we're going to bring them forward. But when people have an issue to report, they tend to put it up on Twitter, and so there's a rich data set of information that is coming in from Twitter, and that is where, as you can see, a lot of issues are being reported.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, we've got about 8 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and hit the unmute button. So if anybody would like to ask a question live or comment, you can now unmute yourself and do so. Thanks for all the great questions so far. Really appreciate it. It's been a good discussion.
One thing I'd like to reinforce is just how fast this can be deployed. And that's one of the reasons why we developed it the way that we've done so, and that was a big benefit to the federal government is just the fact that this is a web application that they can just get access to, and that we're building it in the background so that we can deploy it quickly and get the ML algorithms displayed and running the analysis and summary. This can be deployed in a matter of weeks, for pilots or for larger projects.
All right, well, that's all the questions that have come in. And if there's no further questions or comments, then we can maybe give everybody a few minutes back in their day here. As noted in the chat, we do have 3 webinars coming up in May. You can take a look at stantec.com, the link that's in the chat, if you're interested in any of those. And again, I will post a recording of this back up to the website as well. Thanks for the note there, Kristen. Just go ahead and contact Jonathan directly if you'd like to discuss that further.
Yes, please.
And I'll send out that PDH certificate as well. Anything you want to close with, Jonathan?
Hey, Jonathan, this is Duke Ryder from Arizona State, Lieutenant Cross Project.
Good morning.
Boy, I think you might have referenced our project, and that was my question in there about your ability to look at more abstract issues. I was just wondering, there are a lot of data companies out there scraping data. There are institutes working in ways a little bit like you are doing, and even startups and others. Did you develop this internally? Is this a Stantec product, or is it something you've adopted or adapted? And do you expect to work with other partners in strengthening the capacity of this project?
That's good questions. So, this is an application that has been developed internally by Stantec. We are working with some third parties to help with some of the analysis, some of the more conventional NLP analysis versus the contextual elements that are more water specific. Mm-hmm. The underlying, the application itself is developed by Stantec and is hosted by Stantec. There are a lot of companies that are doing social media data scraping and feeds, but in the market analysis research that we've done, a lot of them are missing that contextual element of how it really applies to a utility and to the water sector. So we saw that as an opportunity for us to come in and and provide that that element of it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. That's very helpful.
No problem.
I'll just follow that up with a Go Devils. As a fellow ASU alum, so good question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
there you go.
ultimately, you know, like there's like the social media data feed, you can run the analysis. A lot of the conventional, just to follow up, I guess, on that. You know, a lot of the conventional analysis around sentiment and intent classification and such, which, you know, is kind of typical brand management analysis. It just doesn't ultimately make it actionable to utility. And so additional work needs to be done in order to do that. And so what we wanted to be able to do is provide that context so it is ultimately actionable, whether you're a utility manager, public relations, or in the operations part of the business.
Right. I think the connection is obviously if it's a utility, it's water. The action that's needed for a broken pipe or whatever it might be is pretty clear. How to take your findings and make them actionable to, let's say, higher level decision makers, elected office officials, or whoever it might be, to become more interested in water infrastructure and realize they need to invest in it. That's sort of where we are, but I can see how your tool could lead to that. It may not be such a one-to-one between what's needed and what has to be applied to a piece of plumbing, but I still can see the connections at a very high level.
Right.
Yeah, the 10 Across initiative, that's a good point. We should have a follow-up discussion on that, Jonathan, and how we can maybe use that as part of that program that we're involved with ASU.
Right. No, this is the connections and potential application is obvious, and it's really exciting. And thank you for sharing with us. It's very generous of you.
No problem. Happy to do so.
All right, great. Well, let's call it there. 10:58. Give you 2 minutes back. Appreciate you joining, everyone. Really do. Great discussion. Big thanks to Jonathan for the demo and the presentation. Feel free to contact him directly with any further questions or comments, and we hope to see you on a future webinar. Have a nice day.